"We're going to destroy this merger tomorrow. The Japanese will leave convinced that Isabella Cordova is incompetent, and we'll walk away $50 million richer." The words sliced through the silence of the 47th floor like a blade. Marcus Williams froze in the hallway, his dark hands gripping the mop handle until his knuckles went ashen. Through the crack in the mahogany door, he could see James Whitmore, the CFO, pacing behind a massive oak table, phone pressed to his ear. "Isabella trusts me completely," Whitmore continued, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "She has no idea what's coming. Tomorrow morning, she'll walk into that boardroom thinking she's securing the deal of her career. Instead, she'll be signing her own corporate death warrant." Marcus Williams had perfected the art of invisibility over his 38 years. At 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders earned through military service, he moved through Manhattan's glass towers like a ghost. His navy blue janitor's uniform was his cloak, making him as unremarkable as the marble floors he cleaned. But invisible didn't mean unobservant. For 3 years, Marcus had walked these halls of Meridian Financial during the graveyard shift. He knew the building's rhythm like a heartbeat, which executives worked late, which ones had affairs, which ones drank too much expensive scotch. He knew these things because invisible people see everything, and Marcus had learned to see without judgment. Tonight was different. Tonight, the conversation he was overhearing wasn't about personal failings. It was about destruction on a massive scale. "The doctored financial reports are already in the presentation folder," Whitmore was saying. "When she pulls up the quarterly projections, the numbers will be completely fabricated. Revenue will show as devastating losses, profit margins catastrophically negative. The Nakamura Group will think we're hiding billions in debt." Marcus felt nauseous. Isabella Cordova wasn't just some faceless executive. Unlike many others, she acknowledged the building staff, remembered names, asked about families. She'd once helped his elderly cleaning partner when she'd fallen, personally ensuring she got medical attention and paid time off. Isabella had built Meridian Financial from a small investment firm into a Wall Street powerhouse through determination and brilliant strategy. She was known for her integrity, her innovation, her refusal to compromise principles for easy profits. And now her most trusted lieutenant was planning to destroy her. "50 million, Whitmore said, and Marcus could hear the smile in his voice. 25 for you, 25 for me. Titan Industries is paying handsomely for this performance. Isabella Cordova will be finished by lunchtime." The voice on the other end said something that made Whitmore laugh, a sound devoid of humanity. "Of course she doesn't suspect anything. I've been her right hand for 10 years. I've had dinner at her house, met her family, been her confidant through every major decision. She trusts me completely." His voice turned reptilian. "That's what makes this absolutely perfect." Marcus backed away from the door, his heart hammering. He'd stumbled into something massive, something that would destroy not just Isabella but thousands of jobs. The merger between Meridian Financial and the Nakamura Group wasn't just business. It was a lifeline for both companies in a volatile market. He thought about walking away. Finish his shift, take the subway back to Queens, slip into his apartment where 8-year-old Zara was sleeping, unaware that her father had witnessed something that could change everything. But Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, his late wife speaking during one of their last conversations before cancer took her. "Promise me something, Marcus," she'd whispered, her hand trembling in his. "Promise you'll teach Zara to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The world's got enough people who look the other way." Marcus had made that promise 3 years ago, kneeling beside a hospital bed that smelled of antiseptic and approaching death. After the funeral, after medical bills consumed their savings and forced him to sell their house, after moving with Zara to a cramped Queens apartment and taking 2 jobs just to survive, Marcus had focused on one thing: providing for his daughter. The night cleaning job at Meridian Financial, had been a godsend. Good pay, health insurance that saved Zara's life when she needed emergency heart surgery 6 months ago, and hours that let him be home when she woke for school. The fact that he sometimes cleaned up after people who made more in a day than he made in a year was just the price of stability, but now that stability was threatened by his own conscience. Marcus made his way to the supply closet at the hallway's end, his mind racing. The small, windowless room had become his refuge during difficult shifts, a place to collect himself when life felt overwhelming. He pulled out his phone and looked at his wallpaper. Zara from last weekend, gap-toothed grin wide as she held up a drawing titled "My Daddy the Hero" in purple crayon. Zara was everything to him. After Sarah died, she'd become his reason for getting up every morning, his motivation for taking soul-crushing jobs, his light in a world grown darker. At 8, she was smart, funny, compassionate, filled with boundless optimism. She still believed good guys always won, that fairness was natural law, that her daddy could fix anything. The heart surgery had been a nightmare. Zara had been born with a septal defect that went undiagnosed until she collapsed during soccer. Emergency surgery saved her life, but bills nearly destroyed them financially. Even with insurance, costs were staggering. Marcus was still paying them off, would be for years. But Zara was alive, healthy, happy. That was all that mattered. Until tonight. Marcus scrolled to Zara's contact. Nearly 3 a.m., but she sometimes had nightmares about surgery, about hospitals, about losing him like she'd lost her mother. On those nights she'd call during his shift, and he'd talk until she fell asleep, his voice a lifeline across the city. Tonight, thankfully, the phone was silent. She was safe in their apartment, probably clutching the stuffed elephant he'd bought after surgery, dreaming of playground adventures and birthday parties. What kind of world was he leaving for her? What example was he setting? If he stayed silent, chose safety over principle, what would he tell her when she was older? How could he teach her to stand up for right when he'd had the chance and chosen to look away? But if he acted, tried to stop Whitmore's conspiracy, he could lose everything. His job, their apartment, their stability, maybe their safety. Men willing to steal $50 million wouldn't hesitate to eliminate a janitor who got too close to the truth. Marcus thought about his options. Call police? What would he tell them? That he'd overheard a conversation while mopping. He had no proof, nothing but a janitor's word against one of Wall Street's most powerful men. Corporate fraud investigations took months or years. Isabella would be destroyed long before any official action. Warn Isabella directly. The idea was almost laughable. He was nobody to her, just part of the invisible army keeping her building running. She probably didn't know his name. Why would she believe him over her trusted CFO? But as Marcus sat surrounded by mops and industrial cleaner, he realized the question wasn't whether he could stop Whitmore's conspiracy. The question was whether he could live with himself if he didn't try. Sarah's voice echoed again, from earlier in their relationship, when she'd told him why she'd fallen in love. "You see injustice, and you can't walk away," she'd said, eyes shining. "You don't calculate odds or worry about consequences. You just do what's right because it's right. That's rare, Marcus. That's precious." At the time, he'd thought she was being romantic. Now, facing a choice that could change everything, he wondered if she'd seen something he'd forgotten was there. Marcus stood, jaw setting with determination. He might be just a janitor, but he was also a father, a veteran, a man who'd made a promise to a dying woman he intended to keep. He couldn't let Isabella walk unknowingly into Whitmore's trap. He just had to figure out how to stop it. For the next hour, Marcus moved through his routine like a man possessed. His body went through familiar motions, emptying trash, vacuuming carpets, wiping surfaces, but his mind focused entirely on the problem. Every few minutes, he found himself back on the 47th floor, staring at the conference room where he'd overheard the conspiracy. He needed more information. If he was going to risk everything, his job, his reputation, his ability to provide for Zara, he needed to understand the full scope of Whitmore's plan. At 4 o'clock, Marcus crossed a line he'd never crossed. He used his master key to enter Whitmore's office. The office was a monument to corporate success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, a mahogany desk the size of a car, leather chairs that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. Walls covered with photographs of Whitmore shaking hands with politicians, celebrities, business leaders. But it was the papers scattered across Whitmore's desk that made Marcus's blood run cold. Email printouts between Whitmore and someone identified as R. Harrison at Titan Industries. The correspondence was coded, but the meaning was clear. Titan was paying Whitmore to sabotage the Nakamura merger. If Meridian failed to secure the deal, Titan would swoop in with their own proposal, stealing a $10 billion opportunity. Marcus photographed the emails with trembling hands. This was evidence, real proof. But he knew it wouldn't be enough. Corporate espionage cases required more than photos taken by a janitor with questionable access. Footsteps in the hallway made his military training kick in. He pocketed his phone, turned off the desk lamp, grabbed a cloth and spray bottle. When security guard Rodriguez appeared, all he saw was the night janitor cleaning windows. "Working late tonight, Marcus?" "You know how it is. Mr. Whitmore has that big presentation tomorrow. He likes his office spotless for important meetings." Rodriguez nodded and moved on. Marcus waited 5 minutes before leaving, locking carefully behind him. Back in his supply closet sanctuary, Marcus reviewed the photos. The evidence was damning, but he was just a janitor with a military court-martial on his record. He'd struck an officer abusing Iraqi civilians. Morally right, but it hadn't looked good on paper. Who would believe him against James Whitmore? At 5:30, the executive elevator chimed. Someone arriving early, very early for a Wall Street executive. Through the maintenance office's security monitor, he watched Isabella Cordova step onto the 47th floor. This was his first real observation of her up close. Isabella was mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back elegantly. She moved with purposeful confidence earned through years of fighting boardroom battles, where she was often the only woman. She was beautiful, but not artificially so. There was something genuine about her, something speaking of long hours and hard-fought victories, of a woman who'd earned position through merit rather than connections. Marcus knew her story. Everyone did. Isabella had started as an entry-level analyst 20 years ago, working up through pure talent and determination. She'd been passed over for promotions, had ideas stolen by male colleagues, faced discrimination that would have broken lesser people. But she'd persevered, and when she got her chance to run Meridian Financial, she'd transformed it into one of the East Coast's most respected investment firms. She was exactly the kind of person James Whitmore would resent. Principled, hard-working, ethical, everything he wasn't. Marcus watched her enter her office and begin preparing for what she believed would be her career's most important day. Even at 5:30 a.m., she looked composed, ready. She had no idea that in less than 4 hours, her most trusted colleague would try destroying everything she'd built. The sight of her calm preparation, her obvious dedication, made Marcus's decision. This wasn't just about stopping corruption. It was about protecting someone who deserved protection. He had to warn her, and he had less than 4 hours to figure out how. At 6 o'clock, Marcus made his move. He took the elevator to the executive floor, positioned his cleaning cart near Isabella's office, and knocked softly on her doorframe. "Excuse me, Ms. Cordova?" Isabella looked up from her computer, clearly surprised to see cleaning staff at this hour. Her expression wasn't unkind, but it was guarded, professional, the look of someone who'd learned to be cautious about unexpected interruptions. "Yes? Is there a problem with the building?" Marcus had rehearsed this moment, but face to face with her, the words seemed inadequate. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something important about your presentation this morning." Isabella's eyebrows rose. "I'm sorry, what?" "The financial reports in your presentation folder, they've been altered. Someone's trying to sabotage the merger." For a moment, Isabella just stared. Then her expression shifted from surprise to confusion to annoyance, before hardening into executive authority. "I'm going to stop you right there," she said, her voice ice-cold. "I don't know what you think you heard or what you're trying to accomplish, but making false accusations against my staff is completely unacceptable. Ma'am, please, I can prove no." Isabella stood, her corporate presence filling the room like a storm front. "I don't know if this is extortion, if you're working for a competitor, or if you've watched too many conspiracy movies, but this conversation is over. I'm calling security." Marcus felt panic rising. "Ms. Cordova, please, just listen." "Security to the executive floor, please," Isabella said into her phone, never breaking eye contact with Marcus. "I have a situation requiring immediate attention." Within minutes, 2 security guards arrived, including Rodriguez, who looked genuinely confused seeing Marcus in Isabella's office. "Is there a problem, Ms. Cordova?" the lead guard asked. "This man was making wild, unfounded accusations about my staff," Isabella said with absolute authority. "I want him removed from the building immediately, and I want his access credentials revoked." Marcus looked at Isabella one last time, desperately trying to convey his warning's urgency. "The folder on your desk. Check the financial projections before your presentation, please." But Isabella had already turned away, dismissing him from existence. Security escorted Marcus to the elevator. As doors closed, he caught a final glimpse of Isabella's office. She was already back at her computer, apparently having forgotten the encounter entirely. Back in the basement maintenance area, Marcus sat on concrete steps and put his head in his hands. He'd blown it completely. Not only had Isabella refused to listen, but he'd probably made things worse. If Whitmore heard about this incident, and he would, Marcus would be fired immediately. Worse, he might have painted a target on his back. Men willing to steal $50 million wouldn't hesitate to eliminate a janitor getting too close to the truth. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, his elderly neighbor who helped watch Zara. "Zara had another nightmare about the hospital. She's asking for you. I told her you'd be home soon." The message hit like a physical blow. Zara was having nightmares again, probably about surgery, about losing him like she'd lost her mother. And here he was, contemplating actions that could cost his job, freedom, maybe life. What kind of father was he being? But then he thought about Whitmore's casual cruelty, about Isabella walking unknowingly into a trap that would destroy her career and thousands of jobs. He thought about all the pension funds and investment portfolios that would be decimated if the company collapsed. Most of all, he thought about what Sarah would want him to do. Marcus checked his watch. 6:45. The presentation was at 9. He had 2 hours and 15 minutes to figure out another way to stop the sabotage. He couldn't call police. Corporate fraud investigations took months. He couldn't convince Isabella directly. She'd made her position clear. He couldn't go to media without solid proof. But there was still one option left, one desperate play that might work if he could find the courage. He had to stop the presentation himself. The 45th floor bustled with pre-meeting energy as Marcus pushed his cart down the corridor at 7:30. The merger presentation was scheduled for 9, and the entire floor hummed with nervous excitement of people preparing for what could be Meridian Financial's most important business meeting. Marcus moved through controlled chaos like a ghost, his invisibility shield fully activated. Executive assistants rushed past carrying folders and laptops, heels clicking in corporate urgency. Junior analysts huddled in corners, frantically reviewing data on tablets. Senior VPs spoke in hushed, urgent tones about market conditions and negotiation strategies. None saw Marcus. To them, he was just building infrastructure, as unremarkable as air conditioning or recessed lighting. The main boardroom dominated the floor's eastern side. Massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River and seating for 50. Through glass walls, Marcus could see technicians setting up projection equipment, while catering staff arranged an elaborate breakfast spread, costing more than he made weekly. This was where Isabella would present the merger proposal to Nakamura Group executives, where she would unknowingly pull up doctored financial reports, destroying everything she'd worked to build. Unless Marcus could stop it. He'd spent the past hour observing, planning, waiting for the right moment. Presentation materials were guarded more carefully than expected. Isabella's assistant, Patricia, hovered over the boardroom setup like a protective mother hen, personally overseeing every detail. But Patricia had to take breaks, handle crises, coordinate with multiple departments. During those brief windows, the boardroom was accessible to someone who knew how to move unnoticed. Marcus positioned his cart outside the boardroom and began cleaning already spotless glass walls, giving him perfect vantage to monitor occupants. At 8 o'clock, Patricia left to escort the Japanese delegation from the lobby. Technicians focused on equipment. Catering staff arranged food in the adjacent prep area. This was his chance. Marcus entered, pushing a vacuum cleaner, just another invisible worker preparing space for important people. On the massive conference table sat Isabella's presentation materials, leather portfolio containing printed reports, laptop connected to projection system, backup drives containing all data supposedly demonstrating Meridian financial strength and stability. The laptop was open, displaying presentation slides. Marcus could see financial charts and graphs that looked legitimate to his untrained eye. But he knew somewhere in this data was the poison Whitmore had planted. Marcus had spent his break researching Meridian Financial's actual performance using the company's internal database, information technically available to all employees, but that no one expected a janitor to access. The real numbers painted a picture of a company performing well, not spectacularly, but solidly enough to make the merger attractive to the Japanese. The doctored numbers would show a company in crisis. Marcus pulled out a flash drive he'd prepared, one containing real financial data he'd compiled from legitimate company sources. He'd spent 2 hours learning basic presentation software, watching YouTube tutorials on his phone, while pretending to take smoke breaks. His hands shook as he approached Isabella's laptop. This was it, the point of no return. Once he touched that computer, replaced doctored data with real information, he'd be guilty of corporate tampering, unauthorized access to executive materials, probably a dozen crimes that could send him to prison. But if he didn't act, Isabella would be destroyed, thousands would lose jobs, and James Whitmore would walk away $50 million richer. Marcus thought of Zara, probably eating breakfast with Mrs. Chen, getting ready for school, blissfully unaware her father was about to risk everything they'd built together. "I'm sorry, baby girl," he whispered. "Daddy's got to do something that might seem crazy, but it's the right thing." He inserted the flash drive and began copying files, replacing doctored financial reports with accurate data he'd compiled. The process seemed eternal, though his watch showed only 3 minutes. Every hallway sound made him jump. Every voice made him expect security bursting through doors. The transfer completed just as Patricia's voice echoed in the corridor, escorting the Japanese delegation toward the boardroom. Marcus quickly closed the laptop, pocketed the flash drive, and grabbed his vacuum. "The meeting space is just finishing preparation," Patricia was saying as she approached with 3 impeccably dressed Japanese executives. "Ms. Cordova will join us momentarily." Marcus was nearly to the door when disaster struck. In his nervousness, he bumped the vacuum against the conference table edge. The machine tipped with a loud crash, and the cord caught Isabella's laptop corner, pulling it toward the floor. Time slowed. Marcus lunged forward, catching the laptop just before it hit, but the sudden movement put him directly in Patricia's sight as she entered with the Japanese delegation. "What are you doing?" Patricia demanded, voice sharp with suspicion. Marcus's mind raced. He was holding Isabella's laptop, standing over her presentation materials, clearly somewhere he shouldn't be. The Japanese executive stared with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, gently placing the laptop back. "I knocked over the vacuum and almost damaged the computer. I was trying to catch it." Patricia's eyes narrowed. She moved quickly to the laptop, checking for damage. The presentation was still open, showing financial charts Marcus had just replaced. "You need to leave immediately," Patricia said. "This area is restricted during executive meetings." "Of course," Marcus said, righting his vacuum. "I apologize for the disruption." As he moved toward the door, one of the Japanese executives, an elderly man with kind eyes, nodded respectfully. "Thank you for protecting the computer," the man said in accented English. "Accidents happen. Your quick thinking prevented damage." Marcus nodded back, grateful for understanding, and wheeled his equipment out. As he left, he could hear Patricia on her phone, probably reporting the incident to security. He had maybe 10 minutes before they came looking. Marcus made his way to the service elevator, heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. He'd done it, replaced the doctored financial data with accurate information. When Isabella gave her presentation, numbers would show Meridian Financial as the stable, profitable company it actually was. But his relief was short-lived. As the elevator descended, Marcus realized his actions had probably been captured on security cameras. Even if the presentation went well, even if the merger was saved, he would be identified as the person who tampered with executive materials. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Zara wants to know if you'll be home to take her to school. She has something special to show you." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what he'd done. By the time Zara got home from school today, her father might be in jail. The elevator reached the basement, and Marcus stepped out into the maintenance area that had been his domain for 3 years. Rodriguez was waiting with 2 other security guards Marcus didn't recognize. "Marcus," Rodriguez said, genuine sadness in his voice, "we need to talk." "I know," Marcus said simply. He set down his cleaning supplies and held out his hands. "I know. Patricia reported that you were tampering with executive materials in the boardroom," Rodriguez continued. "The cameras show you accessing Ms. Cordova's laptop." "Yes," Marcus said. He didn't try to deny it or make excuses. "I did." "Why?" Rodriguez asked. "Marcus, you've got a good job here, a clean record. You've got a little girl who depends on you. Why would you throw all that away?" Marcus looked at Rodriguez, this decent man who'd always treated him with respect, and made a decision. If he was going down, he was going down telling the truth. "Because James Whitmore is trying to destroy Ms. Cordova," Marcus said. "He's sabotaged the presentation to make the merger fail. I was trying to fix it." The guards exchanged glances. This wasn't the confession they'd expected. "That's a serious accusation," one of the other guards said. "I know," Marcus replied, "and I know how it sounds coming from me. But it's true." Rodriguez studied Marcus's face for a long moment. "We need to take you upstairs," he said finally. "Miss Cordova wants to speak with you personally." As they rode the elevator back to the executive floors, Marcus wondered what Isabella would say. She'd already made clear that morning she didn't want to hear his warnings. Now that he'd actually interfered with her presentation materials, she was probably furious. The elevator opened on the 47th floor, where Patricia waited, looking like she wanted Marcus arrested immediately. She led them to a small conference room where Isabella was waiting, still in professional attire, but looking considerably more stressed than that morning. "Leave us alone," Isabella said to the security guards. Rodriguez looked uncertain, but Isabella's tone brooked no argument. I'll be fine. The room emptied except for Marcus and Isabella. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the polished conference table, the powerful CEO and the night janitor who'd just upended her most important presentation. "Explain to me," Isabella said finally, "why I shouldn't have you arrested right now." Marcus took a deep breath. This was his one chance to make her understand. "Because in about 30 minutes you're going to walk into that boardroom and discover that the financial reports James Whitmore prepared contain fabricated data designed to make this company look like it's hemorrhaging money." Isabella's expression didn't change, but Marcus caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Not belief, but perhaps the first crack in her certainty. "And you know this how?" "Because I heard him on the phone last night at 3 a.m., talking to someone at Titan Industries. They're paying him $50 million to sabotage this merger, so Titan can swoop in with their own proposal." Isabella leaned back, studying Marcus with the same intensity she probably brought to analyzing market trends. "Do you have any idea how insane that sounds?" "Yes, ma'am, I do. I know exactly how it sounds coming from someone like me." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "But I also know what I heard. And I know that when you pull up those quarterly projections, they're going to show revenue as losses and profit margins as negative numbers that will convince the Nakamura Group you're hiding massive debt." For the first time, Isabella looked uncertain. "That's very specific." "Because I replaced the fake numbers with real ones," Marcus said. "The data I put on your laptop shows what your company actually looks like, profitable, stable, and worth partnering with." Isabella was quiet, her fingers drumming against the table in rapid mental calculation. Finally, she picked up her phone. "Patricia, I need you to pull the original quarterly reports from our internal database. The real ones. Not the presentation versions. Bring them to conference room B immediately." While they waited, Isabella studied Marcus with undisguised curiosity. "What's your name?" "Marcus Williams, ma'am." "How long have you worked here, Marcus?" 3 years. "And in those 3 years, what have you observed about this company?" Marcus considered carefully. "I've observed that most people here work hard and care about their jobs. I've observed that you treat support staff better than most executives. And I've observed that James Whitmore stays late more often than his work requires, and that he has meetings that don't appear on any official calendar." Patricia arrived with a thick folder of financial documents. Isabella took them and began comparing numbers to what was presumably on her laptop. As she worked, Marcus could see her expression changing, surprise giving way to anger, anger building into cold fury. "These numbers are completely different," she said finally, her voice dangerously quiet. "Yes, ma'am." Isabella looked up at him. "The data you put on my laptop, where did you get it?" "From your company's internal database. I use my employee access to pull the real quarterly reports, actual revenue figures, genuine profit margins. Everything that shows Meridian Financial as the successful company it actually is." "You accessed our internal systems?" "No, ma'am. I used my legitimate employee login. All this information is technically available to any staff member who knows where to look." Isabella stared at him for a long moment, then did something Marcus hadn't expected. She laughed, not with humor, but with bitter recognition of irony. "A janitor," she said. "A janitor just saved my company from $50 million corporate sabotage because he had the curiosity to look at our real numbers." Marcus didn't know how to respond. Isabella stood and began pacing. "If what you're telling me is true, if James has really betrayed me to this extent—" She stopped and looked directly at Marcus. "You realize what you've done? You've accused my CFO of corporate espionage and fraud. These are federal crimes." "Yes, ma'am. I understand that. And you understand that if you're wrong, if this is all some misunderstanding, your life is effectively over." Marcus thought of Zara getting ready for school, probably wondering why her daddy wasn't home to make star-shaped pancakes. "Yes, ma'am. I understand that too. Then why? Isabella's voice was genuinely puzzled. Why risk everything for a company you don't own, for people who probably don't even know your name? Marcus was quiet, thinking about how to explain something so fundamental he'd never had to put it into words. My wife died 3 years ago, he said finally. Before she passed, she made me promise to teach our daughter to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He looked directly at Isabella. I can't teach her that if I'm not willing to do it myself. Oh, something shifted in Isabella's expression, the corporate mask slipping to reveal something more human. What's your daughter's name? Zara. She's 8. And she's the reason you work nights? Yes, Mum. So I can be home when she gets ready for school. And when she comes home, she had heart surgery 6 months ago and... Marcus's voice trailed off. The medical bills, Isabella said, understanding immediately. The insurance covered most of it, but there were still significant costs. I work a second job on weekends to help pay them down. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. Finally, she picked up her phone. Patricia, I need you to reschedule the merger presentation. Ms. Cordova, the Japanese delegation is already here. Tell them we've discovered a last-minute discrepancy in our financial data that needs verification before we proceed. Offer them a tour of our trading floor and our best hospitality. Tell them we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock this afternoon. She hung up and turned back to Marcus. We're going to get to the bottom of this right now. If you're telling the truth, James Whitmore is about to have the worst day of his career. If you're lying... She let the threat hang. I understand, Marcus said. Isabella made another call. James, I need you in conference room B immediately. We have a situation with the presentation materials. And as they waited for Whitmore, Isabella continued studying the financial documents, her anger building with each comparison between real numbers and what had been prepared for the presentation. The fake data isn't just wrong, she said. It's expertly wrong. Whoever created this knew exactly which numbers to alter to make the company look unstable without making it obviously fraudulent. Someone with inside knowledge, Marcus said. Someone with CFO-level access to our systems and methodologies. Isabella's voice was ice-cold. Someone I trusted completely. The conference room door opened and James Whitmore walked in, his usual confident demeanor intact. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. Silver hair, perfectly styled, smile professionally warm. The smile faltered when he saw Marcus sitting at the conference table with Isabella. Isabella, what's going on? Patricia said there was an emergency with the presentation materials, but I don't understand why. His gaze moved between Isabella and Marcus, confusion and alarm crossing his features. Sit down, James, Isabella said, her voice carrying authority that made both men comply immediately. Whitmore took a seat across from Marcus, eyes never leaving the janitor's face. Marcus could see wheels turning in the CFO's mind, trying to calculate how much damage had been done, how much Marcus might know. James, Isabella began, I want you to explain why the financial data in our presentation materials doesn't match the actual performance numbers from our internal database. Whitmore's face went through micro-expressions, surprise, confusion, concern, all perfectly calibrated for someone just learning about a potential problem. I'm not sure what you mean, he said smoothly. The presentation data comes directly from our quarterly reports. If there's a discrepancy, it might be a technical error in the database system. Isabella slid the printed financial documents across the table. These are the real numbers, James. Revenue up 12%, profit margins stable, debt-to-equity ratio well within industry standards. The numbers in our presentation show revenue down 30%, negative profit margins, and debt levels that would make us look like we're on bankruptcy's verge. Whitmore picked up the documents, his face a mask of professional concern as he reviewed them. Marcus had to admire his acting ability. If Marcus hadn't heard the man's conversation, he might have believed Whitmore's performance. "This is concerning," Whitmore said finally. "Someone has clearly tampered with our presentation materials. I'll need to investigate how this happened and who had access to—" His eyes moved to Marcus. Actually, what is he doing here? Why is custodial staff involved in a discussion about confidential financial data? "Because Marcus is the one who discovered the discrepancy," Isabella said. "And he's the one who replaced your doctored numbers with real ones." The mask slipped. For just a fraction of a second, Whitmore's careful composure cracked, and Marcus saw something cold and calculating flash across his features before professional concern returned. "That's impossible," Whitmore said. "Custodial staff don't have access to financial systems. And frankly, Isabella, I'm concerned that you're taking the word of a janitor over your own CFO. The dismissive tone, the casual way Whitmore said "a janitor," as if Marcus weren't sitting right there, seemed to crystallize something in Isabella's expression. "His name is Marcus Williams," she said quietly. "And unlike some people in this room, he appears to be telling me the truth." Whitmore's face hardened. "Isabella, I've been your CFO for 10 years. I've been loyal to you, to this company, through every challenge we've faced. And now you're going to believe wild accusations from someone who has no understanding of corporate finance." $50 million, Marcus said quietly. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Whitmore went completely still. "What did you say?" Isabella asked. $50 million, Marcus repeated, eyes locked on Whitmore's face. "That's what Titan Industries is paying. $25 million for him, $25 million for his accomplice." Whitmore's face had gone pale, but he rallied quickly. "This is ridiculous. Isabella, this man is clearly unstable. He's making random accusations, throwing around numbers." "I heard you on the phone last night at 3 a.m., Marcus continued. "You were talking to someone about how Isabella trusts you completely, how she has no idea what's coming. You said she'd be finished by lunchtime." The silence was deafening. Isabella was staring at Whitmore with dawning horror and betrayal. Whitmore was staring at Marcus with undisguised hatred. "You," Whitmore said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were listening." "James," Isabella said, her voice barely controlled, "tell me Marcus is lying." For a long moment, Whitmore said nothing. Then something shifted in his posture, his expression, as if he'd decided to stop pretending. "You want the truth, Isabella?" he said, and his voice had changed completely. Gone was the warm, supportive tone he'd used for years, replaced by something cold and bitter. "The truth is that you've been living in a fantasy world where merit matters, where doing the right thing gets rewarded, where people like you can build something lasting." Isabella looked like she'd been slapped. "The truth is that men like me, smart men, connected men, we get tired of watching idealistic women get credit for our work, tired of pretending that your vision and leadership matter more than our strategic thinking and financial expertise." Marcus felt a chill. This wasn't just corporate corruption. This was personal, poisonous resentment building for years. "Titan Industries made me an offer I couldn't refuse," Whitmore continued. "Not just the money, though $50 million is certainly attractive, but the chance to finally get the recognition I deserve, to run a company without having to pretend someone else is in charge." Isabella's hands were shaking. 10 years, James. 10 years I trusted you. 10 years I made you look good, Whitmore shot back. Every successful deal, every profitable quarter, every strategic decision that built this company, I was the architect. You were just the face. "And the employees?" Isabella asked, her voice barely audible. "The thousands of people who work here?" Whitmore shrugged. "Collateral damage. Titan will probably keep half of them when they acquire the company's assets." The casual dismissal of thousands of livelihoods seemed to break something in Isabella. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Security," she said into her phone, her voice deadly calm. "I need you in conference room B immediately, and call the FBI. I want to report corporate espionage and fraud." Whitmore laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You think this is over, Isabella? You think catching me ends this? Titan has resources you can't imagine. They'll destroy you in court, tie you up in litigation for years. Even if you survive this, you'll be broken by the time they're finished." "Maybe," Isabella said, "but I'll still be standing, and you'll be in prison." Security arrived, Rodriguez and 3 other guards, followed by Patricia, who looked like she was trying to process information that made no sense. "Mr. Whitmore," Rodriguez said, "we need you to come with us." Whitmore stood slowly, his expensive suit and silver hair giving him dignity, even in defeat. As he moved toward the door, he paused next to Marcus. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly. "You think you're a hero. You're just a pawn who's outlived his usefulness. Titan doesn't leave loose ends." The threat was unmistakable. Marcus felt fear spike through him, not for himself, but for Zara. After Whitmore was led away, Isabella slumped back into her chair, looking older and more tired. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. Isabella looked up, surprised. "Sorry for what?" "For what he said about you, about your work. For you having to learn that someone you trusted could betray me so completely," Isabella finished. "Don't apologize for that, Marcus. That's not your fault. That's his choice, his failure." She paused. "But I do need to apologize to you. Ma'am, this morning, when you tried to warn me I dismissed you, I didn't listen because—" She struggled with her words. "Because I made assumptions about who you were, about what you could possibly know. I judged you based on your job, your appearance, instead of listening to what you were actually saying." Marcus nodded. "I understand why you reacted that way. It probably did sound crazy." "That doesn't excuse it," Isabella said firmly, "and it doesn't excuse the fact that my prejudices nearly cost this company everything." She looked directly at him. "You saved us, Marcus. You saved thousands of jobs, millions in investments, and probably my career. And you did it, knowing it could cost you everything." Before Marcus could respond, Patricia appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Cordova, the FBI is here, and the Japanese delegation is asking about the presentation status." Isabella stood, her executive composure returning. "Tell the FBI I'll be with them in 5 minutes. Tell the Japanese delegation that we've uncovered and resolved a security breach, and we'll be ready to proceed with the authentic presentation at 2 o'clock, as scheduled." Patricia nodded and left. Isabella turned back to Marcus. "I need to handle this crisis, work with the FBI, salvage the merger. But Marcus—" She paused. "This conversation isn't over. We need to talk about your future here." As Isabella left to deal with Whitmore's betrayal aftermath, Marcus sat alone in the conference room, trying to process everything that had happened. He'd done it, stopped the conspiracy, saved the merger, protected Isabella and her company. But Whitmore's parting words echoed, "Titan doesn't leave loose ends." Marcus thought about Zara, probably in math class, working on multiplication tables and dreaming about recess. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Mrs. Chen. "Can you pick up Zara from school today and keep her overnight? I'll explain later, but it's important." The response came immediately. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Marcus stared at the phone, trying to figure out how to answer. He'd just exposed a $50 million conspiracy and made enemies of people with unlimited resources and no conscience. Everything was definitely not okay. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Williams felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, even if it killed him. The FBI arrived in force, 6 agents in dark suits who transformed the 47th floor into what looked like a television crime scene. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of being both key witness and potential suspect, sitting in Isabella's office while agents photographed documents, seized computers, and interviewed anyone with executive floor access. Special Agent Sarah Chen was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who treated Marcus with professional courtesy, suggesting she'd dealt with unusual witnesses before. She listened to his account without skepticism, taking detailed notes and asking precise questions about timing, specific phrases, and technical details. "You have an excellent memory for dialogue," Agent Chen observed, after Marcus had recounted Whitmore's phone conversation for the third time. "Military training," Marcus explained. "In Afghanistan, being able to remember exactly what someone said could be the difference between life and death." "You served?" "3 tours, Army infantry. Left as a sergeant," Agent Chen made a note. "Any specialized training in surveillance or intelligence gathering?" "No, ma'am. Just basic combat operations and patrol work." Isabella was in the adjacent conference room, providing her own statement while forensic accountants began tracing the doctored financial data back to its source. Through glass walls, Marcus could see her gesturing emphatically, her professional composure intact despite the personal betrayal she'd just experienced. "Mr. Williams," Agent Chen said, bringing Marcus's attention back, "I need you to understand the seriousness of your situation. Corporate espionage on this scale typically involves organized crime elements. If Titan Industries is willing to pay $50 million for corporate sabotage, they're not going to simply accept defeat because their scheme was exposed." Marcus felt familiar chill. "You think they'll come after me?" "I think they'll do whatever they feel necessary to protect their investment and reputation. That could range from legal intimidation to—" She let the sentence hang unfinished. "To what?" "To eliminating witnesses who could connect them to federal crimes." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought of Zara, safe for now with Mrs. Chen, but ultimately vulnerable, because her father had chosen to get involved in something far beyond his understanding. "What kind of protection can you offer?" Agent Chen's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "For federal witnesses, we have programs available, but they typically require significant lifestyle changes, relocation, new identities. Is that something you'd be prepared to consider?" Marcus thought about starting over again, about moving Zara away from the only home she'd known since her mother died, about giving up the stability they'd fought so hard to build. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but don't take too long. If Titan Industries decides you're a threat, they won't wait for us to make arrangements." The interview concluded with Agent Chen giving Marcus her card and instructions to call immediately if he noticed anything suspicious. Unusual cars in his neighborhood, strangers asking questions about him, any deviation from normal routine suggesting surveillance. As the FBI continued their investigation, Marcus found himself in strange limbo. He wasn't under arrest, but couldn't leave the building. He wasn't officially suspended, but obviously couldn't return to normal cleaning duties. Instead, he sat in Isabella's executive assistant's office, drinking coffee and watching federal agents dismantle James Whitmore's professional life piece by piece. At noon, Isabella emerged from her marathon FBI interview looking exhausted but determined. She found Marcus in Patricia's office and asked him to join her in her private conference room. "How are you holding up?" she asked as they sat down. "I've been better," Marcus admitted. "The FBI seems to think I might be in danger." Isabella nodded grimly. "Agent Chen told me the same thing. Titan Industries has a reputation for playing hardball, and $50 million represents a significant investment in this scheme. They're not going to simply write it off as a loss." "So what happens now?" "Now we prove that their investment was worthless." Isabella's voice carried steel determination that reminded Marcus why she'd been able to build Meridian Financial into a Wall Street powerhouse. "The merger presentation is still scheduled for 2 o'clock. The Japanese delegation has been briefed on the security breach in general terms, and they've agreed to proceed with the authentic financial data. And Whitmore, in federal custody, facing charges of corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. His assets are being frozen, his communications monitored, and he's looking at 20 years in federal prison if convicted. Isabella's expression was grim. But you're right to be concerned about Titan Industries. They have resources and connections that go far beyond what Whitmore could access alone. Marcus was quiet, processing the implications. Agent Chen mentioned witness protection programs. I know, and I want you to understand that if you choose that route, Meridian Financial will support you completely. We'll provide financial assistance, help with relocation, whatever you need. That's generous, but you'd be giving up your life here, your job, your community, your daughter's school and friends. Yeah. Isabella leaned forward, her expression intense. Marcus, I want to offer you an alternative. What kind of alternative? Stay and fight. Work with me to not just defend against Titan Industries, but to expose their entire operation. Help me turn you from a liability they need to eliminate into an asset they can't touch. Marcus stared at her. I'm not sure I understand. Titan Industries operates in shadows, using corporate espionage and financial manipulation to steal opportunities from legitimate companies. They've probably done this dozens of times, destroyed countless businesses, ruined thousands of lives. But they've never been caught, never been held accountable. Isabella stood and began pacing, her energy building as she outlined her vision. What happened here today? A janitor overhearing a conspiracy and having the courage to act. That's a story that will resonate with people. It humanizes corporate crime in a way that financial reporters and federal prosecutors can't. You want to go public with this? I want to do more than that. I want to make you visible, Marcus. I want to put you front and center in this story so that Titan Industries can't make you disappear without creating a massive scandal. Marcus felt a moment of vertigo. 3 days ago, he'd been invisible, just another worker in corporate America's vast machinery. Now Isabella was proposing to make him the face of a crusade against corporate corruption. I'm not sure I'm the right person for that kind of attention. You're exactly the right person, Isabella said firmly. You're a veteran, a single father, a working man who risked everything to do the right thing. You represent everything that corporate criminals like Titan Industries exploit and dismiss. She sat back down, leaning across the table toward him. Marcus, I can't guarantee your safety. I can't promise this won't be dangerous or difficult. But I can promise you this. If you help me expose Titan Industries, you'll never have to worry about providing for your daughter again. And more importantly, you'll help ensure that what they tried to do here never happens to another company. Marcus thought about Zara, about the promise he'd made to Sarah, about the conversation he'd overheard that started this entire chain of events. He thought about James Whitmore's casual dismissal of thousands of jobs as collateral damage, and about all the other companies that had probably fallen victim to Titan's schemes. What exactly are you proposing? Isabella's eyes lit up with the same intensity Marcus had seen when she was preparing for the merger presentation. First, we hold a press conference tomorrow morning. You tell your story, the whole story, from overhearing Whitmore's conversation to replacing the doctored data. We make you a public figure, someone the media will pay attention to. And then we go on offense. We work with the FBI to trace Titan's other operations, identify other companies they've targeted, find other victims who've been too intimidated or isolated to fight back. We build a coalition of legitimate businesses harmed by corporate espionage and financial manipulation. Isabella was pacing again, her vision expanding as she spoke. We lobby for stronger penalties for corporate espionage. We push for legislation that protects whistleblowers at all levels, not just executives. We create a foundation that investigates and exposes corporate corruption. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror. The scope of what Isabella was proposing was staggering, far beyond anything he'd imagined when he'd decided to warn her about Whitmore's conspiracy. "And you think making me a public figure will protect me from Titan? I think making you a public figure will make it impossible for Titan to silence you without destroying themselves. Right now, you're a lone witness they might be able to eliminate quietly. But if you become a symbol, if your story becomes part of the public record, if you become someone people are watching and supporting—" She shrugged. "They can't make a symbol disappear." Before Marcus could respond, Patricia appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Cordova, the Japanese delegation is ready to proceed with the presentation." Isabella checked her watch. "Already? Time flies when you're planning a corporate revolution." She looked at Marcus. "I need to go secure this merger and save a few thousand jobs, but I want an answer to my proposal by tonight. And if I say no, then I'll help you disappear into witness protection, and you and Zara can start a new life somewhere safe and quiet." Isabella's expression softened. "I won't think any less of you, Marcus. You've already done more than anyone could reasonably ask." "ID." As Isabella prepared to leave for the merger presentation, Marcus found himself alone with a decision that would determine not just his future, but Zara's as well. He could choose safety, anonymity, and a quiet life far from corporate warfare complications. Or he could choose to fight, to become a public figure in a battle against an enemy with unlimited resources and no scruples. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Zara is doing homework and asking when you'll be home. Should I tell her anything specific?" Marcus stared at the message, thinking about what he would tell his daughter. How could he explain that her father had accidentally become a key figure in a federal investigation? How could he make her understand why they might have to choose between safety and justice? He thought about Sarah's promise, about teaching Zara to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. But he also thought about the very real possibility that choosing to fight might put his daughter in danger. Through the conference room window, Marcus could see the Meridian Financial Building's lobby, where normal people were going about normal business, unaware that their livelihoods had been saved by a janitor who'd been in the wrong place at the right time. Or maybe it had been the right place after all. Marcus pulled out Agent Chen's business card and Isabella's proposal, weighing them in his hands like competing futures. By tonight, he would have to choose between disappearing into safety or stepping into the spotlight to fight an enemy he was only beginning to understand. Either way, his life as an invisible man was over. The question was what kind of visible man he wanted to become. The merger presentation proceeded at 2 o'clock, with the kind of precision that only comes from having survived near catastrophe. Marcus watched from Isabella's office as she led the Japanese delegation into the boardroom. Her composure absolute, despite having spent the morning dealing with corporate espionage and federal agents. The authentic financial data that Marcus had risked everything to preserve painted Meridian Financial in exactly the light Isabella had intended. A stable, profitable company with strong growth potential and solid fundamentals. The Nakamura Group executives spent 3 hours reviewing projections, asking detailed questions about market position and strategic vision, conducting the kind of thorough due diligence that $10 billion demanded. At 5:30, the delegation emerged from the boardroom with smiles and handshakes all around. The merger was approved, pending final regulatory review and shareholder votes that were essentially formalities. Marcus felt strange mixture of pride and relief watching Isabella accept congratulations from her staff. He'd saved this moment, preserved these jobs, protected this woman's life work. But the victory felt incomplete, shadowed by knowledge that Titan Industries was still out there, still capable of destroying other companies, still unpunished for their attempted theft. Isabella found him in her office an hour later, looking tired but triumphant. "The merger is secure," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Thanks to you, Meridian Financial will be part of one of the largest investment firms in the Pacific Rim by year's end." "Congratulations," Marcus said, and meant it. "The question now is what happens next?" Isabella studied his face. "Have you thought about my proposal?" Before Marcus could answer, Patricia appeared in the doorway with an expression that immediately put everyone on alert. "Miss Cordova, there are 2 men in the lobby asking to speak with you about the Titan Industries matter. They say they're attorneys, but they're not with the FBI, and they're not scheduled for any appointment." Isabella and Marcus exchanged glances. "Did they give names?" "A Mr. Harrison and a Mr. Kellum. They say they represent Titan's legal department, and that they have a proposal that might resolve this situation amicably." Marcus felt a chill. "Harrison. That was the name on the emails I photographed in Whitmore's office. R. Harrison." Isabella's expression hardened. "How convenient. Titan is already trying to clean up their mess." She looked at Patricia. "Tell them I'll meet with them in conference room C in 10 minutes, and ask security to station someone outside the room during the meeting." "You don't have to do this," Marcus said after Patricia left. "The FBI is handling the investigation. You could just refer them to Agent Chen." "I could," Isabella agreed, "but I want to hear what they have to say. Sometimes you learn more from your enemies when they think they're negotiating than when they think they're under investigation. And you want me there. If you're willing, they probably want to assess the threat you represent to their organization. Let's give them that opportunity." The confrontation with Titan Industries was about to begin, and Marcus realized that whatever happened in the next hour would determine whether he spent the rest of his life running or fighting. He thought of Zara, safe with Mrs. Chen, probably doing homework, and wondering when her daddy would come home. By tomorrow, she might have a father who was either a hero or a target. The choice was about to be made. Conference Room C commanded impressive views of the Manhattan skyline. Isabella and Marcus were seated when Patricia ushered in the 2 men from Titan Industries. Harrison turned out to be a man in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that announced serious money. His companion, Kellum, was younger, probably in his 30s, with the lean build and alert eyes of someone who was more than just a lawyer. "Ms. Cordova," Harrison said, extending his hand with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to see us on such short notice." "Mr. Harrison," Isabella replied, not standing or taking his hand. "This is Marcus Williams. I believe you know who he is." Harrison's gaze shifted to Marcus, and for a moment, Marcus felt like he was being evaluated by a predator, deciding whether he was worth hunting. "Mr. Williams," Harrison said, his tone neutral, "you've caused quite a stir today." "I've told the truth," Marcus replied simply. "Ah, yes, the truth." Harrison took a seat, gesturing for Kellum to remain standing near the door. "That's actually what we're here to discuss. The nature of truth, and how different people can interpret the same events in very different ways." Isabella leaned back in her chair, her expression skeptical. "Is this the part where you deny any involvement in corporate espionage? This is the part where I suggest that certain misunderstandings might be resolved to everyone's benefit." Harrison opened a leather portfolio and removed several documents. "Titan Industries is prepared to offer compensation for any inconvenience that may have resulted from miscommunications between our organizations." "Miscommunications," Isabella repeated flatly. "Sometimes employees exceed their authority, make unauthorized commitments, engage in activities that don't represent their company's actual policies." Harrison's tone was smooth, reasonable. James Whitmore, for instance, appears to have been conducting personal business that had nothing to do with Titan Industries' legitimate operations. Marcus felt anger building in his chest. I heard him talking about $50 million from your company. You heard someone claiming to represent our company, Harrison corrected gently. Corporate impersonation is a serious crime, Mr. Williams. There are people who make a living pretending to be affiliated with successful companies like Titan Industries. The lies were smooth, professional, delivered with confidence that came from years of practice. Marcus could see how ordinary people might be convinced, might begin to doubt their own memories. So you're saying Whitmore was lying about working with Titan? Isabella asked. I'm saying that Titan Industries has no record of any authorized business relationship with James Whitmore or Meridian Financial, Harrison replied. Our forensic accountants have reviewed our financial records thoroughly. No payments to Mr. Whitmore, no contracts related to your merger, no involvement in your internal business operations whatsoever. Kellum spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a subtle threat despite its professional tone. Of course, false accusations of corporate espionage can be very damaging to a company's reputation, the kind of damage that might require legal remedies. Are you threatening to sue us? Isabella asked. We're suggesting that a public retraction of any unfounded allegations might be beneficial for all parties, Harrison said. Along with perhaps a recognition that sometimes good people make mistakes based on incomplete information. Marcus felt like he was watching a masterclass in corporate intimidation. These men were systematically dismantling the case against Titan Industries, creating alternative narratives that would make the FBI investigation seem like a misunderstanding based on an unreliable witness. And what exactly are you offering in exchange for this recognition? Isabella asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Harrison smiled and slid a document across the table. Titan Industries is prepared to make a substantial donation to a charity of your choice, let's say $10 million, to demonstrate our commitment to corporate responsibility. Marcus glanced at the document. It was professionally prepared, with legal language that would effectively absolve Titan of any wrongdoing while positioning them as generous corporate citizens. $10 million to make this go away, Isabella said. $10 million to acknowledge that sometimes investigations based on hearsay can cause unintended consequences, Harrison corrected. And of course, Mr. Williams would be compensated for his inconvenience. How much? Marcus asked, curious despite himself. Kellum opened his portfolio and produced a check already made out to Marcus Williams. $2 million. Tax-free, since it would be considered compensation for damages rather than income. Marcus stared at the check. $2 million. More money than he could spend in several lifetimes. Enough to pay off Zara's medical bills, buy a house, send her to any college she wanted, ensure she would never want for anything. All he had to do was agree that he might have been mistaken about what he'd heard. That corporate espionage was too complex for a simple janitor to understand, that sometimes good intentions led to false accusations. There's one more thing, Harrison added casually. Titan Industries has several subsidiary companies that are always looking for qualified facilities management personnel. We could offer Mr. Williams a position with excellent benefits, competitive salary, opportunities for advancement. The offer was comprehensive. Money, employment, security, everything Marcus had been struggling to provide for his daughter, handed to him on a silver platter. And if we refuse? Isabella asked. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then you'd be choosing a very difficult path. Federal investigations can take years to resolve. Legal challenges from companies defending their reputations can be expensive. And of course, there's always the question of whether witnesses will remain available and credible throughout such a lengthy process. The threat was unmistakable. Marcus felt fear spike through him, not for himself, but for Zara. "Are you threatening Mr. Williams?" Isabella's voice was ice cold. "I'm pointing out realities," Harrison replied smoothly. "Corporate litigation is complex, time-consuming, and unpredictable. People sometimes find it easier to move on with their lives, rather than become entangled in lengthy legal proceedings." Marcus looked at the check again. $2 million. Security for Zara. An end to the constant worry about money, about medical bills, about whether he could provide everything she needed. But accepting it would mean admitting that James Whitmore was right, that people like Marcus were just pawns, easily bought, easily silenced, ultimately irrelevant to the real game being played by powerful people. Marcus thought about Zara's words from their phone conversation. Like when Tommy Chen was being mean to Sarah Martinez at school, and I could have ignored it or told a teacher. I told the teacher, even though Tommy said he'd be mean to me too. His 8-year-old daughter understood moral courage better than most adults. "Can I have a moment to consider this?" Marcus asked. "Of course," Harrison said. "Take all the time you need." Isabella and Marcus stepped into the hallway. "They're good," Isabella said quietly. "Professional, persuasive, offering just enough money to make the ethical choice feel stupid." $2 million is more than I'll make in my entire lifetime," Marcus said. "I know, and I wouldn't blame you for taking it." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about Zara, about the promise he'd made to Sarah, about the kind of man he wanted to be for his daughter. What would happen if we take their money? Titan Industries gets away with attempted corporate theft. Whitmore probably gets a reduced sentence in exchange for not implicating them. And somewhere down the line, they destroy another company, ruin more lives, steal more opportunities. And if we don't take it, then we fight. And fighting means risk for both of us, for our families, for our futures. Marcus thought about Sarah's words. "Promise me you'll teach Zara to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." This was hard. This was the hardest choice he'd ever faced, but his daughter had already shown him the way. They walked back into the conference room, where Harrison and Kellum were waiting. Harrison looked up expectantly as they took their seats. "Mr. Williams," Harrison said, "have you reached a decision?" Marcus picked up the check for $2 million, looked at it one more time, and then tore it in half. "Yes," he said, "I have." Harrison's face went completely blank. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me," Marcus said, standing up. "The answer is no, to all of it, Mr. Williams," Kellum said, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. "I don't think you understand the full implications of—" "I understand perfectly," Marcus interrupted. "You're offering me money to lie. You're offering me security to help you cover up a crime. You're asking me to betray everything I believe in exchange for a comfortable life." He looked directly at Harrison. "The answer is no." Isabella stood as well. "Gentlemen, I think this meeting is over." Harrison's professional mask finally slipped completely. "You're making a serious mistake, both of you." "Maybe," Isabella said, "but it's our mistake to make." "You have no idea what you're up against," Kellum added. "Titan Industries has resources, connections, influence that you can't imagine, and we have something you don't," Marcus said quietly. "Which is the truth." 1 year later, Marcus Williams stood in the lobby of the newly established Corporate Accountability Foundation, watching his daughter Zara color in a corner while Isabella reviewed legal documents at a nearby table. The foundation occupied an entire floor of a Manhattan building, funded by donations from companies that had been victims of corporate espionage and a substantial grant from Meridian Financial. The press conference that had launched everything seemed like a lifetime ago. Marcus remembered standing at a podium, cameras flashing, as he told the world about overhearing James Whitmore's conspiracy and making the choice to act despite the personal cost. The story had resonated far beyond what anyone expected. Within hours, Janitor Hero was trending on social media. Within days, other whistleblowers were coming forward. Within weeks, congressional hearings were being scheduled to investigate companies like Titan Industries. The personal cost had been significant. Marcus and Zara had needed FBI protection for the first month as Titan Industries attempted various forms of intimidation. But the public attention Isabella had predicted would protect them had indeed made them too visible to eliminate quietly. Now, Titan Industries was facing federal charges in 3 states. Their executives were under investigation and their stock price had collapsed. James Whitmore had plea bargained his way to a reduced sentence by providing evidence against his former partners, and the $50 million scheme had become a case study taught in business schools. "Daddy, look what I drew!" Zara's voice brought Marcus back to the present. She ran over, holding a piece of paper, her backpack bouncing. At 9 years old, she had adapted to their new life with remarkable resilience. The drawing showed 3 figures standing in front of a tall building: Marcus, Zara, and Isabella, rendered in bright crayon colors. Above them, Zara had written, "My family," in purple letters. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus said, kneeling down to hug her. Isabella appeared beside them, looking every inch the successful executive, but with a warmth that would have been impossible a year ago. "How was school, Zara?" "Good. I told my class about the foundation again, and my teacher said you're coming to speak to us next week about business ethics." Marcus and Isabella exchanged glances. Zara had become an unofficial ambassador for the Corporate Accountability Foundation, spreading word about their work through the extensive 9-year-old social network. The transformation of Marcus's life had been staggering. He was now the executive director of the foundation, with a salary that was 10 times what he'd made as a janitor, and benefits that included a college fund for Zara covering any university in the world. But more than financial security, Marcus had found purpose. The foundation investigated corporate misconduct, supported whistleblowers, lobbied for stronger protections for workers who reported crimes, and provided legal assistance to small companies being victimized by larger ones. In 1 year, they had opened investigations into 15 companies, secured convictions against 8 executives, and recovered over $300 million in stolen assets returned to their rightful owners. "Speaking of fighting bad guys," Isabella said, "Agent Chen called this afternoon. The grand jury voted to indict the last 3 Titan Industries executives on racketeering charges." Marcus felt deep satisfaction. Harrison and Kellum, among others. Turns out their entire corporate intelligence division was actually a sophisticated espionage operation that had been targeting companies for over a decade. The relationship between Marcus, Zara, and Isabella had evolved gradually, naturally, without anyone explicitly acknowledging what was happening. Isabella had started joining them for dinner once a week, then twice, then several times. She had attended Zara's school plays, helped with homework, and even learned to braid hair when Zara decided ponytails were too babyish. For her part, Zara had adopted Isabella with the easy acceptance of a child who had lost one mother and recognized the potential for another. She called Isabella by her first name, confided in her about playground politics, and had even started asking when Isabella was going to move in with them permanently. Marcus and Isabella hadn't discussed that possibility explicitly, but they both knew it was coming. The attraction between them had grown slowly, built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the deep satisfaction of fighting meaningful battles together. "There's something else we need to discuss," Isabella said, her tone becoming more serious. "Senator Williams wants you to testify next week about the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act." Marcus nodded. Congressional testimony had become a regular part of his life, though he still felt nervous speaking to rooms full of powerful politicians. "What's the focus this time?" "They want you to explain how current protections failed in your case and what needs to change to ensure that other workers in your situation have better support." Zara looked up from her drawing. Will you be on TV again, Daddy? Probably, sweetheart. Can I watch at school like last time? Zara had become something of a celebrity at her elementary school, the daughter of the janitor hero who had saved thousands of jobs and exposed corporate corruption. Her teacher had made Marcus's congressional testimony part of a civics lesson. "Isabella," Zara said, not looking up from her coloring, "are you going to marry my daddy?" The question hung in the air like a perfectly thrown curveball. Marcus felt his face flush, and Isabella looked genuinely startled. "Zara," Marcus began, "that's not really—" "It's okay, Marcus," Isabella said quietly. She turned to Zara with the same serious expression she brought to boardroom negotiations. "Would you like me to marry your daddy?" Zara considered this with 9-year-old gravity. "Yes, you make him smile more, and you know how to make really good pancakes, and you help him fight the bad guys." "Those are excellent reasons," Isabella said solemnly. "Plus," Zara added, "Mrs. Chen says you look at Daddy the same way her husband looks at her, and they've been married for like 100 years. Marcus looked at Isabella, seeing her struggle not to laugh. "Mrs. Chen is very observant. She's also very right," Isabella said, meeting Marcus's eyes. Later that evening, after Zara had been tucked into bed, Marcus and Isabella sat on the couch in their apartment, not the cramped place where he'd lived as a janitor, but a spacious 3-bedroom unit with a view of the river and a kitchen large enough for a family. "So," Isabella said, "a 9-year-old just proposed to me on your behalf." Marcus laughed. "She's always been ahead of her time." "Good thing, because I was starting to wonder if you were ever going to ask." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Isabella Cordova, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife and Zara's stepmother?" "Marcus Williams," she replied. "I thought you'd never ask." The kiss that followed was interrupted by a small voice from the hallway. "Does this mean Isabella is going to live here now?" They broke apart to find Zara peeking around the corner, her stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. "Yes, sweetheart," Isabella said. "If that's okay with you." Zara considered this gravely. "Will you still help Daddy fight the bad guys?" "Every day. And make pancakes on Sundays." "Every Sunday. And help me with my math homework. Especially the math homework." Zara nodded approvingly. "Okay. But I get to be the flower girl at the wedding." "Deal," Marcus and Isabella said simultaneously. 6 months later, Marcus stood in Central Park, wearing the nicest suit he'd ever owned, watching his daughter scatter rose petals down a makeshift aisle while 200 guests, ranging from FBI agents to former Meridian financial employees to senators who had worked on whistleblower protection legislation, waited for Isabella to appear. When she did, wearing a simple but elegant dress and carrying white roses, Marcus felt the same sense of awe that had struck him the first time he'd seen her preparing for the merger presentation. But now, instead of being separated by vast differences in wealth and status, they were united by shared purpose, mutual respect, and deep love. The ceremony was officiated by Judge Patricia Martinez, the federal judge who had presided over the Titan Industries trial, and the vows they exchanged reflected not just their commitment to each other, but their commitment to the work they would continue doing together. "I promise," Marcus said, "to stand with you in fighting for justice, in protecting the vulnerable, and in building a world where our daughter can grow up believing that courage and integrity matter more than power and wealth." "I promise," Isabella replied, "to never again dismiss the voice of someone trying to do the right thing, to remember that wisdom and strength come from unexpected places, and to honor the man who taught me that true leadership means protecting those who can't protect themselves." As they exchanged rings, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, he had been an invisible janitor struggling to provide for his daughter. Today, he was the husband of one of the most powerful women on Wall Street, the head of a foundation that was changing how corporate America operated, and the father of a girl who believed absolutely that good people could change the world. During the father-daughter dance, Zara looked up at Marcus with serious eyes. "Daddy, are you happy? Happier than I've ever been, sweetheart. Even happier than when you were married to Mommy?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Different happy," he said finally. "I loved your Mommy very much and I'll always miss her, but she would want us to be happy, to find love again, to build a family with Isabella." Zara nodded solemnly. "I think Mommy sent Isabella to take care of us." "Maybe she did, baby girl. Maybe she did." Later, as the reception wound down, Marcus found himself standing in the same spot where he had once overheard James Whitmore's conspiracy. Agent Chen approached, holding a glass of champagne. "Any regrets?" she asked. Marcus looked around the room at his new family, his friends, his colleagues in the ongoing fight for corporate accountability. He thought about the legislation that had been passed, the criminals who had been convicted, the companies that had been saved from schemes like Titans. "None," he said simply. "Good," Agent Chen said, "because we just got word that the Corporate Accountability Foundation is being nominated for the Presidential Medal of Freedom." Marcus stared at her. "You're kidding." "Never more serious. The president wants to recognize the foundation's work in exposing corporate corruption and protecting whistleblowers." Isabella appeared at Marcus's side, having overheard the conversation. "The Presidential Medal of Freedom?" "For the foundation," Agent Chen clarified. "But Marcus would accept it on behalf of the organization." Isabella squeezed Marcus's hand. "From invisible janitor to presidential medal recipient in 2 years. Not bad." As the evening ended and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Marcus took one last look around the venue. This was where it had all started, where an invisible man had heard something he wasn't supposed to hear and made a choice that changed everything. Marcus Williams had learned that heroes weren't born in boardrooms or corner offices. They were born in moments of moral choice, when ordinary people decided that justice mattered more than safety, that truth mattered more than comfort, that standing up for others mattered more than protecting yourself. As they walked out together, Marcus, Isabella, and Zara, they passed a security guard working the night shift. "Have a good honeymoon, Mr. Williams," the guard called out. "Take care of that family of yours." "I will," Marcus replied. "You take care too." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and the night air carried the promise of new adventures, new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, from that supply closet where he'd sat with his head in his hands, trying to decide whether to risk everything for a stranger. He'd risked everything and gained more than he'd ever dreamed possible. As they walked toward their waiting car, Zara skipping between her father and new stepmother, Marcus Williams, former invisible janitor, current fighter of corporate corruption, and eternal believer in the power of doing the right thing, smiled and stepped confidently into his extraordinary, visible, meaningful life. The best was yet to come. This story reminds us that heroes come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is a single person willing to stand up for what's right. In a world where it's easy to feel powerless against corporate corruption and systemic injustice, Marcus Williams shows us that courage, integrity, and moral clarity can change everything. Every day, ordinary people face choices between what's easy and what's right. The janitor who reports safety violations, the accountant who exposes financial fraud, the nurse who speaks up about patient neglect. These everyday heroes prove that you don't need wealth or position to make a difference. You just need the courage to act when it matters most. What choice will you make when your moment comes? If this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own power to create change. Like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary potential in ordinary people. And remember, in a world full of corporate boardrooms and corner offices, sometimes the most important person in the building is the one nobody notices. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right. The world needs more heroes like Marcus Williams.